The Mafia boss had eliminated 47 men before sunrise, all because she'd served him wine with bruises she couldn't hide. Now he leaned close and whispered, "Show me who hurt you," and Sophia understood that her husband's 3 years of violence were about to meet something far more terrifying. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The bruise on my left cheekbone had turned a spectacular shade of purple by the time I arrived at Santoro's for my first shift. I'd covered it with foundation thick enough to hide most of the damage, but under the harsh fluorescent lights of the restaurant's back office, I could see the edges bleeding through. My manager, Dennis, had looked at me with that particular expression people wear when they suspect the truth but don't want the inconvenience of actually knowing it. He'd hired me anyway. Desperation made people overlook a lot of things in a high-end Italian restaurant in downtown. Boston needed experienced servers who could handle the demanding clientele without falling apart. I was very good at not falling apart. 28 years of practice had taught me how to compartmentalize pain, how to smile through the ache in my ribs, how to move with careful precision when every step sent lightning bolts of discomfort through my body. The skills weren't something I'd wanted to learn, but Marcus had been an excellent teacher. 3 years of marriage had turned me into a master of deception, of pretending everything was fine while my world crumbled beneath a veneer of normalcy. The dining room at Santoro's was elegant in that understated way that screamed money without being vulgar about it. Dark wood paneling, cream-colored tablecloths, lighting that was somehow both dim and flattering. The kind of place where businessmen closed million-dollar deals over 18-year-old scotch and politicians held meetings they'd later deny ever happened. I'd worked in places like this before. Back when I was working my way through my master's degree in art history, back before. I met Marcus at a gallery opening and mistook his intense attention for love rather than the beginning of ownership. My section included 8 tables, and I'd memorized the layout within the first hour of my shift. Table positioning had become more important to me over the past few months, ever since I'd started planning my escape. I needed to know where the exits were, which paths would take me away from danger fastest, how to position myself so my back was never to any entrance. The hypervigilance was exhausting, but it had kept me alive this long. The evening shift started slowly, early diners trickling in before the real rush began around 8. I moved through my tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this work for years, taking orders, delivering food, refilling wine glasses, all while maintaining the pleasant but distant demeanor that encouraged good tips without inviting unwanted personal attention. My face hurt, my ribs ached with every breath, but my hands stayed steady and my smile never wavered. That's when he walked in. Dante Moretti. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew what he was the moment I saw him. You don't work in places like Santoro's without learning to recognize the different species of dangerous men who frequent them. There were the corporate predators, all expensive suits and ruthless ambition, the politicians with their calculated charm and flexible ethics, and then there were men like him. The ones who didn't need to prove their power because everyone already knew it. The ones who moved through the world with absolute confidence. Because they'd built their empires on foundations most people didn't want to examine too closely. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair just starting to show silver at the temples. Mid-40s, I guessed, with the kind of face that might have been beautiful if it weren't so severe. Sharp cheekbones, a nose that had been broken at least once, and eyes so dark they looked black in the restaurant's low lighting. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I'd make in 3 months, perfectly tailored to a body that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. 2 men flanked him, obviously security despite their expensive clothes, their eyes constantly scanning the room with professional vigilance. Dennis materialized beside me, his voice low and urgent. "That's Moretti. He gets table 12 always. Whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. Don't make him wait, don't ask stupid questions, and for God's sake, be professional." The fear in Dennis's voice told me everything I needed to know about Dante Moretti's position in Boston's hierarchy. Table 12 was in my section. Of course it was, because the universe had decided that my life wasn't complicated enough already. I grabbed menus I wouldn't need, since men like Moretti didn't require menus at their regular establishments, and approached the table with my server's smile firmly in place. My heart hammered against my bruised ribs hard enough to make me lightheaded. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Santoro's." My voice came out steady, professional, exactly what it needed to be. Dante Moretti looked up at me, and I felt the impact of his attention like a physical thing. His eyes moved over my face with an intensity that made me want to step back, but I held my ground. For a moment I thought I saw something flicker in his expression, some subtle shift that suggested he'd noticed what I'd tried so hard to hide, but then it was gone, replaced by polite neutrality. "Good evening." His voice matched the rest of him, deep and controlled, with a slight accent that suggested Italian heritage. "The usual, please." "Of course, sir. Would your guests like anything to drink?" The 2 security guards ordered water and scotch respectively, though I suspected neither would drink much. Men like them needed to stay alert. I took their orders and retreated to the bar, grateful for the distance and the chance to steady my breathing. My hands shook slightly as I prepared their drinks, adrenaline and pain medication creating an uncomfortable cocktail in my bloodstream. When I returned with their drinks, Dante Moretti was alone at the table. His security had taken up positions nearby, close enough to respond to any threat but far enough to provide the illusion of privacy. He looked up as I set his wine glass down with careful precision, and again I felt that penetrating stare assessing me in ways that made my skin prickle with awareness. "Thank you." He paused, his eyes moving to the name tag pinned to my black vest. Sophia, it wasn't my... I'd learned early that using aliases was safer, creating distance in my various identities. Sarah Mitchell had died 3 months ago when I finally worked up the courage to leave Marcus. Sophia Bennett had been born in a women's shelter in Providence, armed with forged documents, and a desperation that made me willing to risk everything for freedom. "You're welcome, sir. Is there anything else I can get for you?" "Not at the moment, but I suspect I'll be seeing more of you tonight." It wasn't a question. Men like him didn't ask questions when they already knew the answers. The evening progressed with the usual rhythm of dinner service. I took orders, delivered food, cleared plates, all while maintaining careful awareness of table 12 and the man who occupied it. Dante Moretti ate slowly, conducting quiet conversations on his phone between courses, occasionally making notes in a small leather book he'd produced from his jacket. Twice men approached his table, conversations brief and intense before they departed, looking either relieved or terrified depending on what had been discussed. I'd learned to read the room in my years of service work, to understand the undercurrents that flowed beneath polite conversation and business negotiations. But Dante Moretti's world operated on frequencies I couldn't quite decode. There was power here, the kind that didn't announce itself but simply existed as an immutable fact. People gave him space without being asked. Conversations quieted when he passed. Even Dennis, normally so confident in his domain, had been careful to the point of obsequiousness when checking on the table. It was during my third approach to check on his dessert course that everything changed. I'd been careful all evening, moving with the practiced caution of someone who'd learned to minimize pain through precision, but one of the other servers had spilled ice behind the bar, creating a slick spot on the floor that I didn't see until my foot hit it. The world tilted and I felt myself falling, my bruised ribs screaming in protest as I tried to catch myself against the nearby table. Strong hands caught me before I hit the ground. Dante Moretti had moved with impossible speed, crossing the distance between his table and my collision course with the floor in seconds. His hands were gentle but firm, steadying me with an ease that suggested he was stronger than his elegant appearance implied. For a heartbeat, we stood frozen, his hands on my waist, my own gripping his forearms for balance. Then he saw it. The foundation I'd applied so carefully that morning had been rubbed away by hours of work and nervous face touching. The bruise on my cheekbone was fully visible now, purple and green and yellow, too large and too distinctly shaped to be anything accidental. I watched his eyes trace the mark, saw the exact moment understanding clicked into place. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin, and something dark and dangerous flickered across his features before he controlled it. "Are you all right?" His voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now, a razor's edge of anger that wasn't directed at me. "I'm fine, thank you." I stepped back, putting distance between us, my heart racing for entirely new reasons. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize." His hands had dropped from my waist, but his eyes never left my face. "Quite a bruise. Would you like to tell me how you got it?" Every instinct screamed at me to lie, to offer some acceptable explanation about clumsiness or accidents. That's what I'd done for 3 years. Spinning stories about walking into doors or falling down stairs, maintaining the fiction that my injuries were anything other than what they were. But something in Dante Moretti's eyes made the lies stick in my throat. There was knowledge there, a recognition that suggested he'd seen enough violence to know the difference between an accident and an assault. I walked into a door. The lie came automatically, practiced through years of repetition. It sounded hollow even to my own ears. Dante Moretti studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he released a breath that might have been frustration or resignation. "Of course you did." His tone suggested he knew exactly what kind of door I was referring to, and it had nothing to do with architecture. "Please, sit down for a moment. You look unsteady." "I can't. I'm working." The last thing I needed was to get fired from this job. It had taken me 3 weeks to find employment willing to pay cash under the table. No questions asked about my lack of proper documentation. Sarah Mitchell's social security number was attached to a woman who'd supposedly died in a car accident. And Sophia Bennett existed only on paper, thin enough to tear if anyone looked too closely. "I'm a regular customer here. I'm sure Dennis won't object to you taking a brief break to recover from nearly falling." It wasn't a suggestion. Men like Dante Moretti didn't make suggestions. They made statements that others followed without question. I found myself sitting at table 12, my legs grateful for the reprieve, even as my mind raced through possible complication tension might create. One of his security guards materialized with a glass of water that I accepted with shaking hands. The ice clinked against the glass, betraying the adrenaline still flooding my system. "How long have you been working here?" Dante asked, his voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather rather than circling around the obvious question hanging between us. "This is my first week." I took a sip of water, using the moment to steady myself. "The job is temporary, just until I get back on my feet." "And where were you before this?" His questions felt strategic, each one designed to gather information while appearing casual. "Providence." The partial truth felt safer than complete fabrication. "I was in school there, studying art history, but circumstances changed." "Circumstances?" His eyes moved over my face again, lingering on the bruise with an intensity that made me want to hide. Is that what we're calling it? I didn't respond, and after a moment he continued. I have a daughter. She's 16. If anyone ever left a mark like that on her face, I would end them. Not quickly, not mercifully, but complete. The casual way he delivered what was essentially a death threat should have terrified. Instead, I felt something unexpected, a twisted sort of comfort in knowing that somewhere in the world, men still believed in protecting women from violence rather than inflicting it. My art history background had taught me about historical contexts of power and protection, about how societies structured themselves around the strong defending the weak. Marcus had perverted that natural order, using his physical advantages to control rather than protect. Your daughter is lucky to have a father who cares. My voice came out quieter than intended. She's lucky to have never needed that kind of protection. Dante leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes still sharp with assessment. You should know that Santoro's is under my protection. Everyone who works here, everyone who eats here, falls under certain guarantees of safety. If someone is causing you problems, that becomes my problem. I appreciate that, Mr. Moretti, but my problems are my own. I'd spent 3 years letting Marcus define my existence, control my choices, dictate my reality. I wasn't about to trade one form of dependence for another, even if this particular offer came wrapped in expensive suits and genuine concern. Independent. I respect that. But independence is a luxury that requires certain resources, safety being the most fundamental. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a frown. I need to handle some business, but I'll be back Thursday evening. Same table, same time. I trust you'll be here. It wasn't really a question, but I answered anyway. If I'm scheduled, yes. Make sure you are. He stood, pulling out a money clip that contained more hundreds than I'd seen in months. He left 5 of them on the table. Far more than his meal cost, and far more than any reasonable tip for your trouble tonight, and perhaps for a new door, one that doesn't fight back. I stared at the money, my pride warring with desperate need. $500 represented weeks of safety, the difference between eating and going hungry, between making rent and sleeping in my car, but accepting it felt like accepting something more, like stepping into an obligation I didn't fully understand. Mr. Moretti, I can't accept this. It's too much. You can and you will. Consider it payment for an interesting evening. He gestured to one of his security guards who stepped forward immediately. Marco will walk you to your car when your shift ends. No arguments. I don't need ... Everyone needs protection sometimes. Even the most independent among us. There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience. Old wounds that had shaped his worldview. Pride is admirable. Stupidity is not. Know the difference. Then he was gone, moving through the restaurant with his security trailing behind him like shadows. Other diners watched his departure with varying degrees of interest and nervousness, the room's energy shifting perceptibly with his absence. I sat at table 12 for another moment, staring at the $500 and trying to process what had just happened. Dennis appeared at my elbow, his expression caught between curiosity and anxiety. Everything okay? Mr. Moretti seemed very interested in your well-being. Everything's fine. I'm just clumsy. Fell near his table. The lie rolled out smoothly now that Dante Moretti wasn't there to see through it. Well, be more careful. Mr. Moretti is our most important client. If he's unhappy with the service, we all suffer for it. Dennis's priorities were crystal clear. The comfort of the staff ranked far below keeping valuable customers satisfied. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of mechanical service and racing thoughts. I moved through my tables on autopilot, taking orders and delivering food while my mind replayed every moment of my encounter with Dante Moretti. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at my bruise, a cold fury that suggested violence was a language he spoke fluently. But that fury hadn't been directed at me. It had been directed at whoever had marked me, and the intensity of that protective rage was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd spent 3 years with a man who claimed to love me while systematically destroying every piece of my self-worth. Marcus's jealousy had been called passion, his control called caring, his violence called correction. I'd lost friends, family, career opportunities, all sacrificed to maintain the fiction of a perfect marriage. By the time I finally understood what was happening, I was so isolated that leaving seemed impossible. The shelters provided temporary refuge, but Marcus had connections, money, and a sociopathic determination to reclaim what he considered his property. True to his word, when my shift ended at midnight, Marco was waiting near the staff exit. He was shorter than his employer, but built like a boxer, with scarred knuckles and eyes that had seen too much violence to be surprised by anything. He didn't speak as we walked through the parking lot to my 15-year-old Honda Civic, just maintained a careful distance while scanning our surroundings with professional vigilance. "Thank you," I said when we reached my car. "But this really isn't necessary. Mr. Moretti thinks it is. That makes it necessary." Marco's voice carried the hint of an accent, Italian like his employer. He gave me a business card that I hadn't asked for. "You have problems, you call that number. Someone answers. Always." I took the card. Heavy cardstock with embossed lettering that simply read Moretti Enterprises and a phone number. No address, no website, nothing to suggest what kind of enterprises Dante Moretti actually operated. What kind of problems? The kind a man with that bruise on your face might cause. Marco's expression softened slightly. "My sister, she had a husband like yours. past tense. Miss Moretti made sure it stayed past tense. The implication hung in the air between us, both reassuring and deeply unsettling. I should go. Thank you again. I drove to the extended stay motel where I'd been living for the past week, checking my rearview mirror obsessively for any sign of Marcus's black Mercedes. He'd found me twice before, dragging me back with promises that quickly dissolved into the same patterns of control and violence. This time felt different, though I couldn't articulate why. Maybe because I'd made it further than before. Maybe because I'd found work quickly enough to avoid the desperation that had driven me back previously. Or maybe because for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at my bruises and recognized them for what they were without requiring me to explain or justify or minimize. The motel room was depressing in that universal way that cheap temporary housing always is. Beige walls, brown carpet with stains I didn't want to examine too closely, furniture that had seen better decades. But it was mine, paid for with money I'd earned, and nobody had the key except me. That made it more valuable than any luxury apartment I'd shared with Marcus, where beauty had been a cage and comfort had come with invisible strings attached. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and wedged the chair under the doorknob like they taught us at the shelter. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and counted the $500 Dante Moretti had left me, separating it into careful piles. $200 for rent extension, $100 for food, $50 for a burner phone to replace the one Marcus had been calling obsessively, the remaining $150 for emergencies, the kind that seemed to multiply when you were living on the edge of survival, my regular phone, the one I should have thrown away weeks ago but hadn't because some self-destructive part of me couldn't quite sever all connections to my former life, buzzed with incoming messages, 17 missed calls from Marcus, 12 voicemails I wouldn't listen to, and a series of text messages that escalated from pleading to threatening with the predictable pattern I'd memorized over 3 years. Baby, please come home. I'm sorry. I love you. It won't happen again. You're being irrational. We can work through this. Where are you? Your family's worried sick. This is ridiculous, Sarah. You're my wife. You're making a huge mistake. I've given you everything. I know you're reading these. Stop being childish. Fine, run. But you'll come back. You always do. And finally sent just an hour ago, I'm coming to find you. And when I do, you'll remember why you belong to me. The threat was clear. Unambiguous. Exactly the kind of thing I could have taken to the police if I had any faith that law enforcement would help rather than complicate things. But Marcus was a corporate lawyer, respected and connected, while I was a woman with no current address working under a fake name, hiding from a marriage that legally still existed. The system wasn't designed to protect people like me. It was designed to return us to people like Marcus, wrapped in the language of reconciliation and second chances. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something closer to resignation. This was the pattern, the cycle I'd been trapped in since I made the mistake of marrying him. He'd find me eventually. He always did. The best I could hope for was to accumulate enough resources to run further next time, to buy myself a few more weeks or months of freedom before the inevitable recapture. But as I fell asleep that night, it wasn't Marcus I dreamed about. It was Dante Moretti's dark eyes studying my bruise and the quiet certainty in his voice when he said he would end anyone who hurt his daughter. Not quickly, not mercifully, but completely. Thursday arrived with the inevitability of all dreaded things. My bruise had faded slightly, now more yellow-green than purple, easy enough to cover with makeup that I applied with practiced efficiency. Dennis had scheduled me for the evening shift, and I knew without being told that table 12 would be occupied by Dante Moretti at exactly 8 o'clock. Men like him operated on precise schedules, and the world arranged itself around their expectation. I was right. He arrived at 8 with his usual security detail, claiming his customary table with the quiet authority that made other diners instinctively adjust their positions to give him space. Tonight he wore a different suit, charcoal gray instead of black, but the effect was the same. Power contained in expensive fabric, danger dressed in respectability. Good evening, Mr. Moretti, I approached with my professional smile, and the wine I'd learned was his preference. Your usual table is ready. Good evening, Sophia. His eyes moved over my face, cataloging the fading bruise with an attention that made me self-conscious. You're healing well. Makeup is a woman's best friend. I poured his wine with steady hands, grateful that my server's training allowed me to perform tasks on autopilot while my nervous system processed the intensity of his attention. Deception is nobody's friend, but sometimes it's necessary for survival. He took a sip of wine, his gaze never leaving my face. Have you given any thought to what we discussed about your protection? I've been managing on my own for several months now. I think I'll be fine. Management and thriving are different things. You're surviving, yes, but at what cost? His perception was uncomfortable in its accuracy. I've made some inquiries. Your husband is Marcus Donovan, junior partner at Berkshire & Lowe, graduated Harvard Law, family money, connections throughout New England. He's been asking questions, calling in favors, looking for his missing wife with the dedication of a man who doesn't accept defeat. My blood turned to ice. How did you find that out? I make it my business to understand potential complications in my territory. Your husband's search has brought him into proximity with certain operations that concern me. That makes you and your situation relevant to my interests. Dante set down his wine glass with deliberate care. He's dangerous, Sophia. More dangerous than you might realize. Men like him don't just hurt their wives. They destroy them, systematically and completely, until there's nothing left but the shell of who they used to be. I know what he is. That's why I left. My voice came out harder than intended, defensive walls rising automatically. Leaving was brave. Staying gone will require more than courage. It will require resources, protection, and a willingness to accept help from people you might not ordinarily trust. He leaned forward slightly, his intensity increasing. I'm offering you those things, not out of charity, but because I believe in protecting what's in my territory. And you, whether you realize it or not, are now part of that territory. I don't understand. What do you want from me? There had to be an angle, some hidden cost to this apparent generosity. Men like Dante Moretti didn't offer help without expecting something in return. Right now, nothing. His answer surprised me with its simplicity. Eventually, perhaps your skills could be useful. Your degree in art history suggests education, sophistication. I have certain collections that require knowledgeable curation, but that's a conversation for later if you survive long enough to have it. The bluntness was almost refreshing after months of Marcus's manipulative language and calculated emotional abuse. Dante Moretti wasn't pretending this was about anything other than mutual benefit. He saw a problem in his territory and a potential resource, and he was addressing both with straightforward efficiency. What would this protection involve? I asked, surprising myself by actually considering the offer. First, you move out of whatever inadequate location you're currently using. I have properties throughout the city, secure locations where your husband won't find you. Second, you accept security when you're working or moving through public spaces. Discreet but effective. Third, you allow my people to handle any direct contact your husband attempts. He paused, something dark flickering across his features. And fourth, you stop pretending you don't need help before your pride gets you killed. The comprehensive nature of his plan suggested he'd been thinking about this since our first meeting, analyzing my situation and formulating solutions with the same strategic precision he probably applied to his less legal enterprises. It should have concerned me, this level of attention from a man who was clearly accustomed to controlling his environment. But Marcus had taught me to recognize the difference between control born from insecurity and control born from competence. One was prison, the other was protection. And what happens when he finds me anyway? Because he will. He always does. The defeat in my voice made me angry at myself, at Marcus for breaking something fundamental in my ability to believe in safety. Then we handle it permanently. Dante's tone was matter of fact, discussing violence with the same casualness most people used to talk about traffic. Your husband is a problem. Problems in my territory get solved. The method depends on the severity of the situation. You're talking about murder. I needed to say it plainly, to acknowledge the line we were discussing crossing. I'm talking about protection. The semantics are irrelevant. What matters is whether you want to spend the rest of your life running and hiding, or whether you want to actually be free. True freedom sometimes requires uncomfortable solution. A commotion near the entrance interrupted our conversation. Raised voices, Dennis's apologetic tones trying to soothe an angry customer. And then a voice I recognized with sick certainty. Marcus. He'd found me faster than I'd expected, and he'd come to Santoro's with the confidence of a man who believed he was entitled to reclaim his property. Where is she? Marcus's voice carried across the dining room, loud enough to make other patrons turn and stare. I know she works here. Sarah, get out here now. I stood frozen, my body locked in the familiar paralysis that had defined too many of my interactions with Marcus. Run or submit, those were the only options my traumatized nervous system recognized. Fighting back had never ended well. Dante moved with fluid grace, standing and intercepting my line of sight to the entrance. His voice was quiet, meant only for me. Go to the kitchen. Use the service exit. Marco is outside with the car. He'll take you somewhere safe, but my shift ... is over. His hand touched my elbow, gentle but insistent, guiding me toward the kitchen corridor. Go. Now I moved through the kitchen on instinct, my body operating on autopilot while my mind struggled to process what was happening. The line cooks barely looked up as I passed, accustomed to the chaos of dinner service. The service exit was exactly where I remembered, leading to the alley where deliveries arrived and staff took smoking breaks. Marco waited beside a black Mercedes that was nothing like Marcus's, but somehow infinitely more intimidating. Get in, he said, opening the rear door without preamble. Mr. Moretti will handle your husband. I hesitated at the threshold between escape and confrontation. Every cell in my body screamed to run, to put distance between myself and Marcus before his anger found a target. But some part of me needed to witness this moment, to see someone finally stand between me and the man who'd spent 3 years convincing me I was worthless without him. Marco seemed to read my hesitation. You go back in there, you put Mr. Moretti in a difficult position. He's trying to protect you. Let him do his job. The logic was sound, but I couldn't make myself move. Through the partially open service door, I could hear raised voices from the dining room. Marcus's tone carrying that particular edge it got when his control was being challenged. And then Dante's voice, quieter but somehow more commanding, cutting through Marcus's bluster like a knife through silk. I need to see. I didn't wait for Marco's permission. Moving back toward the door and positioning myself where I could observe without being seen, Marco sighed but didn't stop me, simply positioning himself to intercept any potential threat to my safety. The dining room had transformed into a theater of tension. Other patrons had gone quiet, their meals forgotten, as they watched the confrontation unfold. Dennis hovered near the entrance, his face pale with anxiety. Marcus stood near the host stand, his lawyer's suit rumpled from travel, his expression twisted with the righteous anger of someone who believed the world owed him compliance. And Dante Moretti stood between Marcus and the rest of the restaurant, his posture relaxed but his presence absolute. His two security guards had materialized from their positions, creating a subtle but unmistakable barrier around their employer. "I'm looking for my wife," Marcus was saying, his voice carrying the authoritative tone in courtrooms. "Sarah Donovan. I was told she works here. This is a family matter, and I'd appreciate it if you'd step aside. There is no Sarah working at this establishment." Dante's voice remained calm, almost conversational. "Perhaps you have the wrong restaurant. Don't lie to me." Marcus's control was slipping, his face flushing with anger. "I know she's here. Someone saw her. Sarah," his voice rose to a shout. "Get out here now. Stop hiding like a coward. You're disturbing my other guests." Dante's tone hardened slightly, danger crystallizing in the space between words. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave, not until I get my wife." Marcus took a step forward, and I saw Dante's security guards shift position, ready to intervene. "You don't understand. She's not well. She's confused. She needs to come home where she can be properly cared for." The manipulation was textbook Marcus, painting me as mentally unstable to explain away my escape. It was the story he'd told my family, my friends, anyone who questioned why I'd become so isolated. "Sarah's having some issues," he'd say with manufactured concern. "The doctors think it's stress-related. She needs rest and support, not people encouraging her delusions." "I understand perfectly." Dante's words cut through Marcus's narrative with surgical precision. "You're a man who's lost control of someone he considered property. You're angry because she had the courage to leave, and now you're here, making a scene in my establishment, because you believe intimidation will work where manipulation failed." The accuracy of Dante's assessment seemed to stun Marcus momentarily. His mouth opened and closed, lawyer's rhetoric deserting him in the face of someone who saw through his carefully constructed facade. "You don't know anything about my marriage," Marcus finally managed. "This is between me and my wife. It's private. Nothing is private when it enters my territory, and you, Mr. Donovan, are not welcome here." Dante gestured to his security. "Please escort this gentleman out, carefully. We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents." Marcus's face went from flush to white as the implications registered. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear flicker across his features, the bully recognizing a bigger predator. "You can't do this. I'm a lawyer. I have rights. I'll have this place shut down. You'll do nothing." Dante's voice dropped to a register that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Because if you continue to harass the woman you've been abusing, if you come to my restaurant again, if you so much as drive past this building, you will discover that there are consequences in this world that your law degree won't protect you from. Do we understand each other?" The threat was delivered with such calm certainty that it somehow carried more weight than if Dante had shouted. Marcus understood. I could see the comprehension dawning, the realization that he'd stumbled into a situation where his usual advantages meant nothing. He was accustomed to fighting in courtrooms and boardrooms where rules and procedures protected men like him. But Dante Moretti operated in a world where different rules applied, and Marcus's privileged position meant nothing. "This isn't over," Marcus said, but the words lacked conviction. "I'll get her back." "No, you won't." Dante's finality was absolute, because she's not yours to get back. She never was. You confused ownership with partnership, control with love, and now you're learning that the illusion you built only worked as long as she was too afraid to walk away. I watched as Dante's security guards took Marcus by the arms, not roughly but with undeniable firmness, and walked him toward the exit. He tried to resist, tried to maintain some dignity, but against two trained professionals, his struggles looked pathetic rather than powerful. At the door, he turned back, his eyes scanning the restaurant desperately for any sign of me. "Sarah." His voice cracked with genuine emotion, though I couldn't tell anymore if it was real or performed. "Please. I love you." The words that might have moved me 6 months ago now just sounded hollow. I'd learned to recognize the difference between love and possession, between caring and control. Marcus loved the idea of me, the version he'd tried to mold me into through 3 years of systematic abuse. But he'd never actually loved Sarah Mitchell, the woman I'd been before I met him, or the woman I was trying to become in his absence. Marco appeared at my shoulder, his voice gentle, despite his intimidating appearance. "He's gone. Moretti wants you to wait in the car. He'll be out shortly." I nodded, finally allowing myself to be led away from the door and into the waiting Mercedes. The interior smelled like leather and cologne, expensive and foreign. A world away from Marcus's car with its new car scent and classical music, and the undertone of anxiety that always accompanied our drives together. Through the tinted windows, I watched Dante emerge from the restaurant 10 minutes later. He moved with unhurried grace, stopping to speak briefly with Dennis before crossing to the car. When he slid into the seat beside me, his expression was unreadable. "Your husband is persistent. I'll give him that." Dante's tone was almost admiring, the way one predator might acknowledge another's hunting skills. "But persistence without wisdom is just stupidity in different clothes. Did you hurt him?" I needed to understand what kind of man I was accepting help from. I hurt his pride, which is often more effective than physical violence with men like him. He believes he's entitled to certain things. Your obedience, your presence, your entire existence. I simply explained that his beliefs don't align with reality in this part of the city. The explanation was matter-of-fact, violence implied but not confirmed. He won't give up. You don't understand how he thinks. He sees me as something he invested in, something he built. Letting me go would mean admitting he failed. And Marcus doesn't fail. Everyone fails eventually. Dante's certainty was absolute. The question is whether they accept it gracefully or need to be taught. Your husband strikes me as someone who will require teaching. I'm prepared to provide that education. The car pulled away from Santoro's, heading into neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Upscale brownstones gave way to modern high-rises, the city transforming as we moved through it. I should have been afraid, sitting in a car with a man I barely knew, being taken to an unknown location, but fear had become such a constant companion that its absence felt more notable than its presence. With Dante, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of actual safety. Where are we going? I finally asked. Somewhere your husband won't find you. I have a property in the North End, secure building, good security, quiet neighbors who know better than to ask questions. You'll stay there until we determine the best long-term solution to your situation. Long-term solution. The phrase suggested permanence, or at least the kind of permanence that came from eliminating problems rather than running from them. What kind of solution? That depends on your husband's willingness to accept reality. Dante turned to face me, his dark eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. Some men can be reasoned with, convinced that pursuing a lost cause will cost more than it's worth. Other men require more definitive persuasion. I don't yet know which category Mark Donovan falls into. And if he's the second type, my voice was steadier than I felt. Then I'll handle it, permanently. There was no hesitation in his response. No moral ambiguity, just the simple certainty of someone who'd made similar decisions many times before. The car stopped in front of a renovated brownstone in a neighborhood that screamed old money and older secrets. Marco got out first, scanning the street with professional vigilance before opening my door. Dante led me inside, past a lobby with marble floors and Art Deco lighting, into an elevator that required a key to access the upper floors. The apartment on the 8th floor was nothing like what I'd expected. I'd been bracing myself for something ostentatious, the kind of wealth that announced itself with gold fixtures and excessive luxury. Instead, the space was elegant in its restraint. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, furniture that looked both comfortable and expensive. Original artwork on the walls that my art history training immediately recognized as genuine pieces worth more than most people's houses. A Kandinsky study in one corner, what looked like a small Rothko over the fireplace. Several Italian Renaissance sketches in museum-quality frames. You have excellent taste, I said, moving closer to examine a charcoal drawing that might have been a Michelangelo preparatory sketch. These are museum quality. They were in a museum. Dante's tone suggested this was unremarkable, until I acquired them through various means, some legal, some less so. I find that beauty shouldn't be locked away in institutions where only the privileged few can appreciate it during limited viewing hours. So you stole them. The accusation came out more curious than judgmental. After 3 years with Marcus, my moral compass had been so thoroughly scrambled that art theft seemed almost quaint compared to the violence I'd endured. I liberated them. There's a difference. Dante moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. Bourbon. Expensive judging by the bottle. Some things belong to everyone, and some things belong to those who truly understand their value. I understand beauty in all its forms. He handed me a glass, and I took it despite rarely drinking. The bourbon burned going down, but left a warmth that felt medicinal. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening's events settling over us like dust after an explosion. This apartment is yours for as long as you need it. Dante gestured around the space with his glass. Fully furnished, utilities included, security better than most government building. Marco will be stationed in the building along with 2 other men. Your husband won't get within 3 blocks without us knowing. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I needed to understand the transaction, the invisible price tag attached to the sanctuary. Nothing in my experience suggested that powerful men offered help without expecting something in return. Eventually, your expertise. I wasn't exaggerating about needing someone with your background. I have collections that require proper curation, authentication, preservation, but that's a future conversation. Right now, I get the satisfaction of ensuring that an abusive piece of shit doesn't get to continue hurting someone in my territory. The crude language was unexpected. A crack in his composed exterior that revealed genuine anger beneath. Why do you care? You don't know me. I'm just a waitress in one of your restaurants. Dante set down his glass with deliberate care, those dark eyes finding mine with uncomfortable intensity. When I was 16, I watched my uncle beat his wife to death in their kitchen. Took him 45 minutes. She screamed for help that never came because everyone in the family knew what he was like, but no one wanted to get involved. Family business, they said. Not our place to interfere. I stood outside their apartment door and listened to her die because I was too young and too stupid to understand that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing everyone tells you to avoid. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest in a way that made my chest ache. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. Don't be sorry. Be grateful that you found someone willing to interfere, because I swore that day that I would never again stand by while someone suffered violence they didn't deserve. It's why I do what I do. It's why half this city's abusers and predators end up disappearing without explanation, and it's why your husband is going to learn that some women are protected by things he doesn't understand and can't fight. The implications of what he was telling me should have been terrifying. This wasn't just protection, it was a promise of violence delivered by someone who had the means and the moral certainty to follow through. But I'd spent 3 years being terrified of the wrong person. Maybe it was time to let someone terrifying work in my favor for once. There are 3 bedrooms, Dante continued, shifting back to practical matters. Master suite is yours. The other 2 are for security if needed. Kitchen is fully stocked, but Marco can arrange for anything you need. There's a panic button in every room. Press it and armed men will be here in under 2 minutes. Questions? What about my things? Everything I own is in that motel room. Not that I had much, just clothes and a few personal items I'd managed to salvage when I left Marcus the final time. Marco will collect them tonight. Give him the key and the address. Anything else you need, make a list. Consider this a fresh start. The casual way he arranged my life should have felt like more control, more manipulation. Instead, it felt like someone had finally removed the crushing weight I'd been carrying alone for years. I don't know how to thank you. The words felt insufficient for what he was offering. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when your husband is no longer a problem and you're actually free. Dante moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Tomorrow morning, a woman named Isabella will come by. She's my daughter. She's interested in art history, and I thought perhaps you could spend some time with her, help her understand the pieces here. It would give you something to do besides worry about your husband. The request surprised me. You want me to tutor your daughter? I want my daughter to meet a woman who had the courage to leave an impossible situation. I want her to understand that strength comes in many forms. And yes, I want her to learn about art from someone who actually understands it rather than just memorizing facts from textbooks. A slight smile softened his severe features. She's headstrong and occasionally difficult. You'll like her. After Dante left, I explored the apartment with the cautious wonder of someone who couldn't quite believe their circumstance. The master bedroom was larger than my entire motel room, with a bed that looked like it had been designed for royalty. The bathroom featured a clawfoot tub and a shower with enough jets to qualify as a car wash. The closet was walk-in, currently empty except for a few items of clothing in approximately my size, tags still attached. I found myself drawn back to the artwork in the living room, studying each piece with the analytical eye I'd developed during my graduate studies. The Kandinsky was from his Bauhaus period, all geometric precision and vibrant color. The Rothko was earlier than his famous color field work, more figurative, more tormented. The Renaissance sketches were studies for larger works, the kind of preparatory drawings that revealed an artist's process more honestly than finished paintings ever could. Marcus had collected art too, but only as investment, status impressed clients and colleagues. He'd never understood beauty for its own sake, never appreciated the human stories behind the work. Everything in his world had to serve a purpose, generate value, contribute to his carefully constructed image of success. The panic attack hit me around midnight. I'd been holding it together through sheer force of will, but alone in this beautiful apartment with nothing to distract me from processing the evening's events, my nervous system finally crashed. My hands shook, my breathing went shallow and rapid, and the room started to spin with vertigo that had nothing to do with physical balance and everything to do with emotional overload. I found myself in the bathroom, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold tile floor, trying to remember the breathing exercises from the therapy sessions I'd attended before Marcus convinced me the therapist was the problem. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 6 counts out, repeat until the world stopped tilting. A knock on the apartment door sent fresh adrenaline through my system. Marco's voice came through, concerned but professional. "Miss Bennett, I heard something. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I called out, proud that my voice only shook slightly. "Just drop something. If you need anything, I'm right outside. The door's secure and Donovan is not getting anywhere near this building." The reassurance helped, though not as much as knowing there were armed men between me and Marcus's rage. I eventually made it to the bedroom, crawling under covers that smelled like expensive detergent and sanctuary. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by dreams where Marcus found me, and Dante appeared from shadows to stand between us, and everything dissolved into violence I couldn't quite see but felt in my bones. Morning arrived with weak November sunlight filtering through gauze curtains. I woke disoriented, forgetting for a moment where I was, expecting to see the motel's water-stained ceiling or worse, the bedroom I'd shared with Marcus. Reality reasserted itself slowly, the elegant furnishings and quality linens reminding me that I'd been rescued, though I still wasn't entirely sure what that rescue would ultimately cost. Marco had apparently let himself in at some point during the night because my meager possessions from the motel were neatly arranged in the living room. 2 garbage bags of clothes, a box of books, my laptop with its cracked screen, and the shoebox containing the few photographs and documents I'd managed to keep hidden from Marcus. Everything I owned in the world, fitting comfortably on one couch. I was sorting through my clothes, trying to decide what was worth keeping and what should be thrown away when the doorbell rang. Marco's voice came through before I could panic. "It's Isabella Moretti. She's expected." The young woman who entered could have been a younger, feminine version of her father. Same dark hair, same intense eyes, same way of moving through space with unconscious confidence. But where Dante's presence was controlled and slightly dangerous, Isabella's was vibrant and curious. She wore designer jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be, but she didn't carry herself with the affected sophistication that usually accompanied that kind of wealth. "You must be Sophia." Isabella's smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way that suggested she she'd inherited her father's intensity but not his guardedness. Dad said you're an art historian. That's so much cooler than most of the people he usually has me meet. I'm currently more of a waitress than an art historian, I admitted. But yes, I have a master's degree in art history. Your father mentioned you were interested in learning more about his collection. Isabella moved through the apartment with easy familiarity, clearly comfortable in her father's space. She stopped in front of the Rothko, tilting her head with genuine curiosity rather than the pretentious appreciation I'd seen too often in gallery opening. I don't get abstract art. Like, I know I'm supposed to feel something, but I just see colors and shapes. Does that make me uncultured? It makes you honest. I joined her in front of the painting, feeling the familiar comfort of discussing something I actually understood. Most people pretend to have profound reactions to abstract work because they think they're supposed to. The truth is, not every piece speaks to every person, and that's okay. But let me ask you something. When you look at this painting, what's your immediate emotional response? Not what you think you should feel, but what you actually feel. She studied the canvas for a long moment, her expression serious. Sad, maybe? There's something heavy about it. The colors are beautiful, but they feel like they're sinking, like they're too heavy to hold themselves up. That's perfect. I felt the familiar excitement of teaching someone who was genuinely curious rather than just checking boxes. Rothko painted this in 1949, right after World War II. He'd seen photographs from the concentration camps, watched the world tear itself apart, witnessed humanity at its worst. These colors aren't just pretty arrangements. They're grief and trauma and the weight of surviving something that fundamentally changed how you see the world. You're not looking at shapes. You're looking at what it feels like when everything you thought you knew about human nature turns out to be wrong. Isabella turned to me with wide eyes. Dad never explained it like that. He just said it was valuable and I should appreciate it. Your father understands value. I'm teaching you to understand meaning. They're not always the same thing. We moved to the Renaissance sketches and I found myself falling into the comfortable rhythm of teaching, explaining the technical aspects of line and form while discussing the historical context that made these drawings revolutionary for their time. Isabella was an attentive student, asking questions that revealed a sharp intelligence hidden behind teenage casualness. She wanted to know about the artists' lives, their struggles, their relationships, not just what they created, but why they created it. The conversation flowed naturally from art to broader discussions about creativity, expression, the ways people throughout history had tried to make sense of chaos through beauty. Can I ask you something personal? Isabella's tone shifted, becoming more serious. Dad said you were in a bad situation, that you needed protection. Is that why you're here? The directness was startling but refreshing after so many people dancing around the truth. Yes, I left my husband because he hurt me. Your father offered to help, and you trust him with everything? She wasn't challenging me, just trying to understand because Dad is, complicated. He does things that aren't exactly legal. Most people are afraid of him. I thought about how to answer honestly without betraying Dante's trust or corrupting his daughter's view of him. I trust that your father understands violence in ways most people don't. I trust that he's seen enough abuse to recognize it when he sees it. And I trust that when he makes a promise to protect someone, he keeps it. Does that mean I understand everything about him or agree with everything he does? No. But trust doesn't require complete understanding. It just requires believing someone will do what they say they'll do. Isabella nodded slowly, processing this. He killed my mother's killer, when I was little. Someone from a rival family. I don't really understand all the details. But Dad made sure the person who hurt my mom never hurt anyone else. The casual way she discussed murder should have shocked, but I had already accepted that Dante Moretti operated in a world with different rules. Does that bother you, knowing what your father is capable of? It used to, but then I realized that the people Dad hurts are people who hurt others first. He's not random or cruel. He's surgical, precise. And honestly, the world probably needs more people willing to do ugly things to protect people who can't protect themselves. Her worldview was remarkably mature for 16, shaped by growing up in a family where violence was a tool rather than a taboo. We spent the rest of the morning discussing art and life, the conversation flowing between technical analysis and personal revelation. Isabella told me about her private school, her struggles with fitting in among classmates who didn't understand her family's business, her plans to study international relations in college. I found myself sharing more than I'd intended about my own education, my marriage, the slow erosion of self that happened when someone systematically dismantled your sense of worth. You should talk to Maria, Isabella said suddenly. She's Dad's cousin, kind of. She left an abusive husband about 5. Dad helped her too. Set her up with a flower shop in the North End, made sure her ex-husband understood that coming near her again would be a fatal mistake. She'd understand what you're going through better than anyone. The revelation that Dante had done this before, that I wasn't some unique charity case but part of a pattern of protection, was oddly comforting. It suggested this was principle rather than whim, a consistent moral code, even if that code was enforced through methods most people would find terrifying. Isabella left around noon with promises to return the following week for more art lessons. After she was gone, I felt the absence of her energy acutely. The apartment was too quiet, too empty, too full of time to think about everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. I tried to distract myself with unpacking, organizing my meager possessions in the massive closet, but the task took less than an hour and left me with nothing but anxious energy. My phone, the one I should have thrown away months ago, buzzed with incoming messages. More texts from Marcus, escalating in their desperation and anger. He'd found my motel room empty, my few possessions gone. Now he was promising everything from reconciliation to legal action to vague threats about what would happen when he found me. The last message sent just 10 minutes ago made my blood run cold. I know you're with him, that gangster from the restaurant. Do you have any idea what you've done? What he is. You think you're safer with a murderer than with your own husband. You're pathetic, Sarah. Always were. But you're mine and I'm coming to get what's mine. I stared at the message, hands shaking, trying to decide if I should tell Dante or handle this myself or just throw the phone away and pretend Marcus didn't exist. The decision was made for me when the apartment door opened and Dante walked in, Marco trailing behind him. Your husband has been busy. Dante's expression was grim as he set down a manila folder on the dining table. He's filed for a court order claiming you're mentally unstable and a danger to yourself. He's got 3 psychiatrists lined up willing to testify that you need to be institutionalized for your own protection. And he's hired a private investigator who's very good at finding people who don't want to be found. Can he do that? Legally, I mean? The question felt stupid even as I asked it. Marcus was a lawyer. Of course he could manipulate the legal system to his advantage. He can try. But it won't work because you're not going to any hearings, responding to any summons, or giving him any opportunity to use the system against you. Dante opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents I couldn't quite see from my position. Your husband is desperate, which makes him dangerous. Desperate men make mistakes. We just need to wait for him to make one big enough that we can respond appropriately. Respond appropriately. The euphemism was almost elegant in its vagueness. What does that mean exactly? It means I'm having him watched, every move tracked, every contact documented, every threat recorded. When he does something actionable, and he will because men like him always do, we'll have evidence that justifies whatever response becomes necessary. Dante's calm certainty was both comforting and terrifying. I showed him the text messages, watching his expression darken as he read through Marcus's escalating threats. This is good. His reaction surprised me. This shows intent, makes any future restraining orders easier to justify. And this last message, where he threatens you directly, that's useful. Useful for what? For building a case that your husband is a danger to you and others, for establishing patterns of behavior that justify protective measures, and if necessary, for explaining why certain things had to happen to ensure your safety. He looked up from the phone, his dark eyes finding mine. How far are you willing to let me go to protect you, Sophia? The question hung between us, heavy with implications I only partially understood. What are my options? Option 1, legal protection. Restraining orders, police involvement, working within the system. It's slow, bureaucratic, and often ineffective, but it's clean. Option 2, practical protection. Your husband has an unfortunate accident. Nothing traceable, nothing violent enough to raise questions, but permanent enough that he's no longer a concern. Option 3, psychological protection. We make him believe that pursuing you will cost him everything he values. His career, his reputation, his freedom. We don't touch him physically, but we dismantle his life piece by piece until backing off seems like his only option. The clinical way he laid out my options should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself actually considering them, weighing the pros and cons of each approach like I was choosing a meal plan rather than deciding someone's fate. Marcus had spent 3 years making me feel powerless, convincing me that my only options were submission or suffering. Now someone was offering me actual choices, real power, the ability to decide what happened next. I don't want him dead. The words came out more certain than I felt. I don't want that on my conscience, and I don't want you to have to carry it either, but I want him to stop completely, permanently. I want him to understand that I'm not his property, that he doesn't get to control my life anymore, that there are consequences for 3 years of abuse. Then we go with option 3. Dante closed the folder with finality. It'll take time, maybe a few weeks to properly execute. But when we're done, your husband will be so busy trying to salvage what's left of his life that you'll be the least of his concerns. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. I was reading in the living room trying to lose myself in a novel I couldn't quite focus on, when Dante arrived with Marco and another man I hadn't met before. They carried laptops and files, transforming the elegant dining table into a command center for whatever operation they were running. This is Vincent, Dante said by way of introduction. He specializes in financial investigations and corporate espionage. He's been looking into your husband's professional life. Vincent was younger than Marco, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of unremarkable appearance that probably served him well in his line of work. He opened his laptop and pulled up what looked like bank statements and tax returns, documents that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside Marcus's accounting firm. Your husband has been embezzling from client trust accounts for about 18 months. Vincent's tone was matter-of-fact, discussing felonies with the casual air of someone reviewing a shopping list. Nothing too obvious, just small amounts skimmed off settlements and retainers, but it adds up to roughly $300,000. Been using the money to fund a lifestyle his actual salary couldn't support. I stared at the numbers on the screen, trying to reconcile this information with the man I'd been married to. Marcus was controlling, abusive, manipulative, but a thief? That's illegal. He could be disbarred, go to prison. That's the idea. Dante moved to stand beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. We've documented everything, created a paper trail that leads directly to him, and we're preparing to send this information to the Massachusetts Bar Association and the district attorney's office. Anonymous tip from a concerned citizen who noticed irregularities in their case settlement. You're going to destroy his career. The realization was both horrifying and satisfying in equal measure. I'm going to give him consequences for his actions. Dante's correction was precise. He made choices. Choices to steal from clients. Choices to abuse his wife. Choices to pursue you after you left. Now he gets to live with the results of those choices. Over the next week, I watched Marcus's life unravel through reports that Dante brought to the apartment. The Bar Association launched an investigation. 3 clients filed complaints about missing settlement fund. His law firm placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the inquiry. Each piece of news should have made me feel vindicated, but instead I felt oddly hollow, like I was watching the destruction of a stranger rather than the man I'd once loved enough to marry. He's falling apart, Vincent reported during one of their strategy sessions. Drinking heavily, making mistakes at work before they suspended him. His family is distancing themselves, and he's still obsessed with finding you. Private investigator he hired is asking questions all over the city. Let him ask. Dante's confidence never wavered. He won't find anything because there's nothing to find. Sophia Bennett doesn't exist in any database he has access to, and Sarah Donovan is legally dead as far as official records show. The forgery of my death certificate should have bothered me more than it did, but Dante had explained it as necessary protection, a way to legally sever all connections to my former life. Sarah Mitchell had died in a car accident in New Hampshire 3 months ago. Paperwork filed and accepted without question. Now I was truly starting over, reborn as someone Marcus could never claim as his property. My days developed a strange new rhythm. Mornings with Isabella, teaching her about art and listening to her stories about school and friends and the complicated politics of being the daughter of Boston's most powerful organized crime figure. Afternoons alone, reading or watching Marco's careful surveillance of the street below, learning to feel safe in silence. Evenings with Dante when he had time, discussing art and strategy, and the slow dismantling of Marcus's life. One night, about 2 weeks into my stay at the apartment, Dante arrived late with takeout from an Italian restaurant I didn't recognize. He looked tired, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, and I realized I'd never seen him anything other than perfectly composed. Rough day? I asked, taking the food containers and setting them on the dining table. Complex negotiations that required more patience than I typically possess. He loosened his tie, a gesture that felt surprisingly intimate, but they're concluded now so I can focus on more pleasant matters. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who've spent enough time together to not need constant conversation. The pasta was excellent, and I found myself actually tasting food for the first time in weeks rather than just mechanically consuming calories to stay functional. Your husband made a mistake today. Dante set down his fork, those dark eyes finding mine with intensity I'd learned meant something significant had happened. He approached Maria at her flower shop, tried to intimidate her into telling him where you were, said things about what he'd do to you when he found you. Very specific, very detailed threats. Is Maria okay? I'd met her once, Dante's cousin who'd also escaped an abusive marriage. She'd welcomed me with the understanding of someone who'd walked the same dark path. Maria's fine. Marco was with her, and your husband discovered that threatening someone under my protection is a poor life choice. He paused, something shifting in his expression, but we recorded everything. His threats, his admission that he's been searching for you, his statements about what he considers his rights regarding his property, his words, not mine. The recording is evidence. For what, if for whatever would be. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying me with that assessing gaze I'd grown accustomed to. The bar investigation will conclude in approximately 1 week. They'll find evidence of embezzlement, recommend disbarment, and forward the case to the DA for criminal prosecution. Your husband will be facing felony charges, likely prison time if convicted, but there's still the matter of his obsession. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that it's time for a conversation between me and your husband about boundaries, consequences, and the reality of a situation. Dante's tone remained calm, but there was steel underneath. I'm suggesting that sometimes people need to understand viscerally, not just intellectually, that certain behaviors have certain results. You want to hurt him. It wasn't a question. I want to educate. If that education involves some discomfort on his part, so be it. But I won't do anything you're not comfortable with. This is your life, your choice, your call about how far we go. I stood, moving to the window to stare out at the city lights below. 3 years of abuse had taught me that violence begat violence, that escalation was a spiral with no bottom. But it had also taught me that Marcus only understood power, only respected force, only backed down when confronted with something more dangerous than himself. Words wouldn't stop him. Legal consequences might slow him, but wouldn't eliminate his obsession. What Dante was offering was a different kind of justice, the kind that existed outside courtrooms and legal procedures. Show me, I said quietly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. And show me who hurt me. Show him what it feels like to be powerless, to be afraid, to understand that he's not in control anymore. But don't kill him. I need him to live with the consequences of what he's done. Death would be too easy, too quick. I want him to wake up every day and remember what he lost and why he lost it. Dante came to stand beside me at the window, his reflection visible in the glass beside mine. That can be arranged. His voice carried satisfaction, as if I'd finally said something he'd been waiting to hear. Marco will bring him here tomorrow night. Just a conversation, but the kind that leaves lasting impressions. If you want to be present, you can be. If you'd prefer to be elsewhere, that's also acceptable. I'll be here. The decision felt right, felt like reclaiming something Marcus had taken from me. Not revenge exactly, but accountability. Witnessing the moment when he finally understood that his power over me had been an illusion, sustained only by my fear and his willingness to use violence against someone weaker. That night I dreamed of Marcus for the first time since leaving him, but in these dreams I wasn't running. I was standing still, watching him rail against constraints he couldn't break, realizing that all his strength meant nothing against people who understood violence better than he ever could. The dreams should have been nightmares, but they felt more like prophecy. Wednesday evening arrived with heavy gray clouds promising rain. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that felt like armor: black jeans, a dark sweater, my hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Isabella had offered to stay with me, but I'd sent her home. This wasn't something a 16-year-old needed to witness, even one as worldly as Dante's daughter. Marco and Vincent arrived first, transforming the elegant living room into something else. They moved furniture, creating an open space in the center, covered the expensive rug with plastic sheeting that made my stomach clench with implications I tried not to examine too closely. Set up a single chair in the middle of the room, sturdy wood that looked like it could withstand significant strain. Dante appeared at 7, wearing all black. His usual elegant suits were placed with clothes designed for movement and function. He carried a leather bag that he set down without opening, and I found I didn't want to know what it contained. "Last chance to leave," he said, studying my face with concern that softened his severe features. "What happens next isn't pretty. It's not civilized. And you can't unsee it once you've witnessed it. I know. And I'm staying. I need to see this. Need to see him understand." Marcus arrived 15 minutes later, Marco and another guard half dragging him through the door. My husband looked nothing like the composed lawyer I'd married. His suit was rumpled, his face unshaven, his eyes wild with the combination of alcohol and desperation. He struggled against his captors until he saw me standing by the window, and then he went still. "Sarah." His voice cracked on my name, the name I'd shed like a snake's skin. "Thank God. These men kidnapped me. Call the police, we can go home. I'll forgive you for this insanity. We'll get you the help you need." The familiar manipulation rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, casting himself as victim and me as the unstable one who needed rescuing. It was the same script he'd been performing for 3 years. The same narrative that had kept me trapped in our marriage long after I understood what he was. "Her name is Sophia now." Dante's voice cut through Marcus's pleading with surgical precision. "Sarah Donovan died 3 months ago. Car accident in New Hampshire. Very tragic. All the paperwork is filed with the appropriate authorities." Marcus's face went from hopeful to confused to enraged in the span of seconds. "You can't just erase someone's identity. That's illegal. I'm a lawyer. I know my rights. I know her rights. She's my wife. She belongs to me. She belongs to no one." Dante moved closer, his presence making Marcus shrink back, despite being roughly the same height. "But since you seem confused about basic concepts like ownership and consent, I thought we should have a conversation. The kind that clarifies certain realities." Marco and Vincent forced Marcus into the chair, and I watched my husband struggle against restraints being applied to his wrists and ankles. The thick plastic zip ties were the kind police used, impossible to break without tools. Marcus pulled against them frantically, his lawyer's mind clearly racing through the implications of his situation. "This is kidnapping, assault, false imprisonment." Marcus's voice rose to a shout. "When I get out of here, I'll have all of you arrested. I'll make sure you spend the rest of your lives in prison. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Actually, you have no idea." Dante's correction was almost gentle. "You're a corporate lawyer who thinks his law degree and family connections make him powerful. You spent 3 years beating a woman half your size and convinced yourself that was strength. But real power, Mr. Donovan, real power is so absolute that it doesn't need to announce itself." Marcus's eyes found mine across the room, desperate now. "Sarah, please, tell him this is a mistake. Tell him to let me go. I love you. I've always loved. We can work this out. I'll change. I promise I'll change." The promises were the same ones he'd made after every incident, every bruise, every broken promise. I'd believed them at first, wanted so badly to believe that the man I'd married was still in there somewhere beneath the rage and control. But I'd learned that people showed you who they were through actions, not words. And Marcus had shown me his true nature repeatedly over 3 years of systematic abuse. "I'm not asking them to let you go." My voice was steadier than I felt. "I'm here to watch you understand what you've done, to see you powerless for once, to witness the moment you realize that you don't get to hurt me anymore." Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile the submissive wife he'd created with the woman standing before him now. "You've been brainwashed. He's manipulated you. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't you, Sarah. You're right. This isn't Sarah. Sarah was weak. Sarah was afraid. Sarah believed your lies about love and caring. But Sophia knows better." I moved closer, feeling strength I didn't know I possessed. "Sophia understands that sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to show them something more dangerous." Dante positioned himself directly in front of Marcus, his posture relaxed but his presence absolutely commanding. "Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Donovan. You're going to answer some questions, honestly, completely, without the lawyer double talk you're so fond of. And depending on your answers, you're either going to walk out of here tonight with a very clear understanding of your future behavior, or you're going to leave in peace. Your choice. You can't threaten me. Marcus's bravado was crumbling, fear bleeding through his anger. I have rights. There are laws. Laws are interesting things. They work wonderfully for people like you, people with resources and connections and the ability to manipulate systems. But they work less well for women trying to escape abusive marriages. For people who need protection, the system won't provide. That's where people like me come in. We operate in the spaces between laws, providing the justice that courtrooms can't or won't deliver. Dante pulled the leather bag closer, unzipping it slowly. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet apartment. I couldn't see the contents from my position, but Marcus's eyes went wide with terror at whatever he saw inside. Show me who hurt you. Dante's voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and terrible. Show me exactly where he put his hands when he decided you needed to be taught a lesson. The request took me by surprise, my breath catching in my throat. This was the moment of truth, the chance to make Marcus's abuse visible in ways that legal testimony never could. I moved forward on trembling legs, feeling Marco's supportive presence behind me, knowing I could stop this at any moment, but also knowing I needed this. Needed Marcus to see himself through my eyes. I pointed to my left cheekbone, the one that had been purple and green when Dante first saw me. Here, he backhanded me when dinner wasn't ready on time. Said I was disrespecting him by making him wait. Dante's expression never changed, but something cold and lethal flickered in his eyes. He turned to Marco. Note that. Left cheekbone, backhand, cuz. Late dinner, my ribs. I lifted my sweater slightly, showing the fading yellow-green bruises that had been deep purple 2 weeks ago. He kicked me when I was on the ground, said I was clumsy for falling down the stairs. He'd pushed me down. Note that. Right ribs. Kicked while down, after pushing victim downstairs. Marcus was shaking now, his face pale as he watched me catalog his violence with clinical precision. This is insane, Sarah. Stop this. I never meant to hurt you. You made me angry. You don't understand what it's like to work all day and come home to chaos. I was stressed. It wasn't personal. It was extremely personal. My voice cut through his excuses. Every time you hit me, every time you told me I was worthless, every time you isolated me from friends and family, that was personal. That was you choosing violence over communication. That was you deciding your comfort mattered more than my safety. I continued pointing out injuries, some visible, others long healed but never forgotten. The twisted wrist from when he'd grabbed me too hard, the concussion from being slammed against the kitchen counter, the burns on my forearms from hot coffee thrown during an argument. 3 years of violence documented on my body, each scar a testament to Marcus's true nature. When I finished, Dante turned back to Marcus with an expression that made my former husband flinch. Now you understand the magnitude of what you've done, the systematic nature of your abuse, the calculated way you used violence to control someone you claimed to love. Marcus was crying now, tears streaming down his face, words tumbling out in desperate justification. I was wrong. I know I was wrong, but I can change. I'll go to therapy, anger management, whatever she wants. Please, I'm begging, don't hurt me. Change is interesting concept. Dante pulled something from the leather bag, and I saw Marcus's eyes track the movement with animal terror. People talk about change like it's simple, like deciding to be different is enough, but real change requires consequences. Understanding that actions have prices, that you can't just apologize your way out of 3 years of calculated cruelty. What are you going to do to me? Marcus's question came out as a whimper. Dante leaned in close, his voice dropping to that intimate whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. I'm going to give you a choice, Mr. Donovan. Option 1, you disappear. New city, new life, new identity. You never contact Sophia again. You never speak her name. You accept that your marriage is over and your former wife is dead. You rebuild whatever's left of your life somewhere far from Boston, and you never, ever come back. And option 2? Option 2 is that you continue being the man you've been, the one who thinks he owns his wife, the one who believes his law degree protects him from consequences, the one who makes threats and tries to intimidate women under my protection, and then I show you what real violence looks like, the kind that doesn't leave visible scars but changes you fundamentally, the kind that makes you wake up every morning grateful you're still breathing and terrified of what might happen if you ever step out of line again. The room fell silent except for Marcus's ragged breathing and the distant sound of rain beginning to fall outside. I watched my husband, this man who'd controlled every aspect of my life for 3 years, reduced to a trembling mess in a chair, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. It all disappear. Marcus's voice was barely audible, broken by sobs that shook his entire body. I'll leave Boston. I'll never contact her again. Just please, please don't hurt me. Dante studied him for a long moment, those dark eyes assessing whether the capitulation was genuine or just another manipulation. Then he nodded once to Marco, who produced a document from inside his jacket. This is a legal agreement. You're signing away any claim to your wife, any shared property, any future contact. You're acknowledging the embezzlement charges pending against you and agreeing not to fight disbarment proceedings. You're accepting a new identity we've created for you in Phoenix, Arizona, complete with a job at a document review firm that pays just enough to survive on, modestly. Marcus stared at the papers with the hollow eyes of someone watching their entire life collapse. This is extortion. This is mercy. Dante's correction was absolute. The alternative is that Sophia presses charges charges for 3 years of domestic violence, armed with medical records, photographs, and testimony from multiple witnesses. The alternative is that the Bar Association discovers not just embezzlement but falsified billing records, client conflicts of interest, and ethics violations that make disbarment the least of your concerns. The alternative is that you become a cautionary tale about what happens to men who hurt women under my protection. Where do I sign? The defeat in Marcus's voice should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt oddly empty, like I'd been bracing for a fight that never materialized. The monster who'd haunted my nightmares was just a man after all, weak and pathetic when faced with consequences he couldn't lawyer his way out of. Marco released one of Marcus's hands, providing a pen. My former husband signed with shaking fingers, his elegant signature reduced to barely legible scrawl. Each page turned felt like a door closing, sealing off a chapter of my life I'd never wanted to write. When he finished, Vincent took the documents, scanning each page methodically before nodding confirmation to Dante. Your flight leaves tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Marco will drive you to your apartment now, where you'll pack one suitcase of essentials. Nothing sentimental, nothing traceable. You have 30 minutes. Then you go to a hotel near the airport where you'll wait until your flight. If you deviate from this plan in any way, if you attempt to contact anyone, if you so much as think about running, the consequences will be immediate and permanent. Marcus nodded mutely, all his fight gone. Marco and Vincent cut the restraints and hauled him to his feet. He stood unsteadily, looking older than his 32 years, broken in ways that had nothing to do with physical violence. His eyes found mine one last time across the room. I did love you, Sarah. Whatever else you believe, know that was real. The statement carried no manipulation, no hidden agenda, just the sad truth of a man who'd confused possession with affection, control with caring. I know you believe that. My response was honest despite everything. But love doesn't hurt. Love doesn't leave bruises and broken bones. What you felt was ownership, Marcus. And I'm not anyone's property anymore. They took him away, then Marco's firm grip on his elbow guiding him toward the door. Vincent followed, already on his phone, coordinating the logistics of Marcus's exile, and then he was gone, removed from my life with the same efficient precision Dante applied to all his operations. The apartment felt different in his absence, lighter somehow, as if Marcus had been carrying darkness that dissipated when he left. I stood at the window, staring out at rain-soaked streets, trying to process what had just happened. 3 years of my life concluded in less than an hour. The man who'd controlled my every movement, dictated my every choice, reduced to a broken shell, accepting exile as preferable to facing Dante Moretti's alternative. You're shaking. Dante's voice came from behind me, concerned but not intrusive. He maintained careful distance, as if understanding I needed space to process this seismic shift in my reality. I thought I'd feel different. I turned to face him, trying to articulate the complicated emotions churning through me. I thought seeing him powerless would make me feel strong. Instead, I just feel tired, and maybe a little sad for what could have been if he'd been a different person. That's because you're not like him. You're capable of empathy even towards someone who doesn't deserve it. Dante moved closer, still respecting boundaries but offering presence. That's not weakness, Sophia, that's humanity. Don't confuse the two. Did you mean it? About hurting him if he'd chosen differently? I needed to understand who this man was, this person who'd appended my life in ways both terrifying and liberating. Yes, his honesty was absolute. I've done worse to people who've done less. Okay, violence is a tool I use without hesitation when necessary, but I prefer solutions that don't require bloodshed when alternatives exist. Your husband was a coward at heart. Cowards respond to fear more effectively than pain. The rain intensified outside, turning the city into an impressionist painting of lights and water. I felt myself swaying slightly, the adrenaline that had sustained me finally draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Dante caught my elbow before I could stumble, his touch gentle despite the violence those same hands were capable of. You should rest, it's been an intense evening. He guided me to the couch, maintaining that careful distance that suggested respect rather than disinterest. Would you like me to stay for a while, or would you prefer to be alone? Stay. The request came out more vulnerable than I'd intended. I don't want to be alone right now. Don't want to be alone with my thoughts and the ghost of who I used to be. He settled beside me on the couch, close enough that I could feel his warmth, but not touching. We sat in comfortable silence while rain drummed against windows and the city moved on below us, oblivious to the small drama that had played out in this elegant apartment. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time felt fluid, unmoored from normal measurements. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for what he'd done, but they were all I had. For seeing me, for believing me, for making me safe. You did the hard part. You left. You survived. You found the courage to accept help. Dante's voice carried genuine respect. I just provided resources and removed obstacles. Oh, the strength was always yours. I found myself leaning against him, my head resting on his shoulder with an intimacy that should have felt strange, but somehow didn't. He didn't pull away, just adjusted his position to accommodate mine, his arm coming around my shoulders with careful gentleness. We stayed like that as the storm raged outside, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort and shared understanding of violence and its aftermath. What happens now? I asked eventually. Marcus is gone, but I'm still legally dead. I'm living under a false identity in an apartment I don't pay for. I don't know how to move forward from here. Now you rebuild. The certainty in his voice was grounding. You decide who Sophia Bennett wants to be. what she wants to do, where she wants to live. I can help with logistics, documentation, whatever you need, but the choices are yours. For the first time in years, your life belongs only to you. The concept was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd spent so long being controlled, first by Marcus's explicit violence and before that by societal expectations about who I should be. That genuine freedom felt like standing at the edge of an abyss. Possibilities stretched out in every direction with no map to guide me. I want to work with art again, not just looking at it in private apartments, but actually contributing to the field. Maybe teaching, maybe curating. The dream I'd abandoned when I married Marcus suddenly felt achievable again, and I want to help other women, the ones still trapped like I was. I want them to know there's a way out. Both of those things can be arranged. Dante's mind was already working through logistics. I could hear it in his tone. I know several gallery owners and museum directors who owe me favors. And as for helping other women, I think Maria would welcome a partner in that endeavor. She's been running a kind of informal network for years, providing resources and protection to abuse victims. Your psychology background and personal experience would be invaluable. We talked into the early morning hours, planning a future I'd never imagined possible. Dante would establish legitimate credentials for Sophia Bennett, creating a background solid enough to withstand scrutiny. I'd start teaching part-time at a community college while working toward positions at larger institutions. The apartment would remain mine for as long as I needed it, with no obligations beyond continuing. Isabella's art education and occasionally authenticating pieces for Dante's various collections. The sun was rising when Dante finally stood to leave, his usual immaculate appearance rumpled from hours on the couch. He paused at the door, turning back with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sophia, yes, there's something you should know. My heart rate picked up at the serious tone. What? 47 men? The number hung in the air between us. That's how many people disappeared without a trace in the hours after your husband entered Santoro's that first night, demanding to know your location. Associates of his, people he'd hired to track you, private investigators asking the wrong questions in the wrong neighborhoods. I had them all removed from the equation before dawn. The revelation should have horrified me. 47 people disappeared like they'd never existed because they represented potential threats to my safety. But I found I couldn't summon the moral outrage that should have accompanied such knowledge. Marcus had mobilized a small army to hunt me down, and Dante had neutralized that army with the efficient brutality that characterized all his operations. Before sunrise, I said quietly, all of them gone before sunrise. I told you I was serious about protection. His eyes held mine, dark and uncompromising. Those men chose to participate in hunting an abuse victim for money. They knew what they were doing. They accepted the risks. When those risks materialized, they paid the price, and Marcus never knew. That's why he looked so defeated tonight. He thought he had resources, but you'd already eliminated them all. A predator is most dangerous when cornered with no options. I made sure your husband had only one acceptable path forward, with every alternative already closed off. It wasn't mercy, Sophia. It was strategy. After he left, I stood at the window watching the sun paint the city in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere out there, Marcus was packing his single suitcase, preparing for exile. And somewhere beneath the city, in places I'd never know about and didn't want to, 47 men were gone. Erased, eliminated. All because a waitress had warned a crime boss about an assassination attempt and accidentally became someone worth protecting. The weight of those disappeared lives should have crushed me. Instead, I felt something closer to grim satisfaction. They'd chosen to hunt a woman fleeing abuse. They'd accepted money to help a predator reclaim his prey. And they'd learned too late that some prey were protected by things more dangerous than themselves. I was free, truly, completely free for the first time in years. And that freedom had cost 47 lives, though none of them mine. The moral calculus was complicated, but I'd learned that survival often was. 6 months passed, like pages turning in a book I was finally allowed to write myself. The community college hired Sophia Bennett as an adjunct professor teaching art history to students who were mostly working adults pursuing delayed dreams. My colleagues knew nothing about my past beyond what my carefully constructed credentials revealed. I was just another academic rebuilding a career, unremarkable except for my apparently wealthy patron who occasionally sent cars to pick me up after evening classes. The work with Maria's network proved more challenging and more rewarding than I'd anticipated. We helped 11 women escape abusive situations in those first 6 months, providing safe houses, legal documentation, and the kind of protection that came from Dante's extensive network. Each woman's story echoed my own in different keys, the same themes of control and violence and gradual erosion of self-worth, and each woman who found safety felt like redemption for the years I'd spent as a victim. Isabella flourished under consistent art education, her natural intelligence finally finding focus. She'd been accepted to Georgetown's International Relations program for the fall, planning to follow her father's footsteps into the family business. Though her version would involve legitimate diplomacy rather than organized crime, Dante was proud in his quiet way, though I caught him sometimes looking at his daughter with an expression that suggested he wished she could have a simpler, safer life. As for Dante and me, what developed between us defied easy categorization. We weren't exactly dating, though we spent several evenings a week together discussing art and philosophy and the complicated ethics of operating outside legal systems. We weren't exactly friends, though he knew things about me no friend would ever. We were something else, something that existed in the same gray spaces where his business operated, undefined but undeniable. Marcus kept his bargain. Reports from Vincent confirmed he'd stayed in Phoenix working his document review job, living in a modest apartment, drinking too much but causing no trouble. His law license had been permanently revoked. The criminal charges had been quietly dropped after he cooperated fully with investigation into his former firm's practices. He was exactly what Dante had made him, a cautionary tale rather than a continued threat. On a Tuesday evening in early summer, Dante arrived at the apartment with a bottle of wine I recognized as exceptional even before reading the label. 1961 Chateau Latour, the kind of wine that appeared in investment portfolios rather than dinner. He opened it with practiced efficiency, pouring 2 glasses with the same precision he applied to every. What's the occasion? I accepted the wine, savoring the complex flavors that spoke of decades in careful storage. I received word this afternoon. Marcus Donovan was found dead in his Phoenix apartment. Apparent suicide. He'd been drinking heavily, took an entire bottle of sleeping pills. Left a note apologizing to his family for his failures. The news should have affected me more profoundly. This was the man I'd married, promised forever to, built dreams with before those dreams turned into nightmares. But I felt only distant sadness, the kind you might feel reading about a stranger's tragedy in the newspaper. Marcus had died months ago for me when I walked out of our marriage for the final time. This was just his body catching up to that reality. Did you kill him? The question came out calmer than I felt. No. Dante's answer was immediate and honest. The surveillance reports were accurate. He'd been deteriorating for months. Depression, alcoholism, inability to accept what his life had become. Last night he apparently decided he'd had enough. The note was genuine. Handwriting analysis confirms it. He killed himself, Sophia. No one helped him along. I should feel something more. I stared into the wine, watching light refract through burgundy depths. Guilt, or relief, or grief, but I just feel empty, because you mourned him long before he died. You mourned the man you thought you married, the life you thought you'd have, the person you were before he broke something fundamental inside you. His physical death is just a formality. The marriage died years ago. We sat in silence, processing this final chapter of my old life. Marcus was gone, truly and completely gone now, unable to ever threaten me again, even if he'd wanted to. The fear I'd been carrying like a second skin finally had permission to dissolve. I've been thinking about something. Dante set down his glass, those dark eyes finding mine with unusual vulnerability. About us, what we are, what we might become. My heart rate picked up despite my attempt at composure. What have you been thinking? That I'm too old for you, that my world is too dark, that you deserve someone who can offer you a normal life, someone who doesn't have blood on his hands and enemies waiting for any sign of weakness. He paused, something shifting in his expression, and that despite all of that, I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. The confession hung between us, raw and honest in a way that made my chest ache. Dante Moretti, who controlled half of Boston's criminal underworld, who'd eliminated 47 men without hesitation, who operated with cold efficiency in a world of violence, was vulnerable. For me, I don't want normal. I moved closer, closing the distance between us on the couch. Normal is what I had with Marcus. Predictable patterns of abuse dressed up as domesticity. What I want is real, honest, someone who sees all of me, including the broken parts, and doesn't try to fix them or exploit them. I'm not a good man, Sophia. The warning carried weight. The things I've done, the things I'll continue to do, they're not justifiable. I operate outside the law because I believe some people deserve justice the legal system won't provide. But that doesn't make me righteous, just effective. I know what you are. My hand found his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. I've always known, and I'm choosing you anyway. Not because you're good, but because you're honest about what you are. Because when you promised to protect me, you kept that promise without conditions or expectations. Because you gave me back my life when you could have demanded anything in return. He kissed me then, finally closing the distance we'd been maintaining for months. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was hungry and desperate and full of all the longing we'd been carefully ignoring. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I went willingly, pressing against him with equal need. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I need you to understand what this means. If we do this, if we become what I think we're becoming, you're mine. Not in the way Marcus claimed ownership, but as equals, partners. You're choosing my world, my enemies, my risks, then I'm choosing all of it. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. I'm choosing the man who saw my bruises and decided I was worth protecting. The man who eliminated threats I didn't even know existed. The man who gave his daughter art lessons and eliminated predators with the same calm efficiency. I'm choosing you, Dante. Completely. We made love that night with the intensity of people who'd been denying attraction for too long. Every touch was a claim, every kiss a promise. He was careful with my body in ways Marcus never had been, attentive to responses and boundaries, even in the heat of passion. And when we finally lay tangled together in the expensive sheets, watching the city lights paint patterns on the ceiling, I felt more at home than I had anywhere in years. The art world eventually embraced Sophia Bennett, though they never knew the full story behind my emergence. One published papers on Renaissance authentication techniques. I curated exhibitions for small galleries that gradually became larger institutions. I taught students who would go on to careers I could only imagine. And through it all, Dante was there, supporting my work while maintaining careful distance from the legitimate career I was building. Maria and I expanded the Women's Network into a full nonprofit, funded by anonymous donations that I suspected came from Dante's various operations. We helped hundreds of women escape dangerous situations, providing not just immediate safety but long-term resources for rebuilding lives. Each woman who walked away from abuse felt like vindication for the years I'd spent as a victim. Isabella graduated from Georgetown with honors and immediately joined her father's organization, though her division focused on legitimate business operations rather than the criminal enterprises Dante still oversaw. She'd learned from both of us, I thought, taking her father's strategic thinking and my appreciation for building rather than destroying. On a cool autumn evening 2 years after that first night at Santoro's, Dante and I stood in the apartment that had become our shared home. I wore a simple dress, the color of storm clouds, and he was immaculate as always in dark gray that matched his eyes. His daughter stood beside us, smiling through tears, while Marco and Maria witnessed the ceremony that made our partnership legal in addition to emotional. I'd entered Dante's world as a frightened woman seeking safety from an abusive husband. I'd become something else entirely, something I'd never imagined possible. Not just a survivor, but someone who helped others survive. Not just protected, but powerful in my own right. And not just loved, but choosing love with full knowledge of its costs and complication. The woman who'd once covered bruises with makeup and lied about walking into doors was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that safety sometimes required violence, that justice sometimes existed outside courtrooms, and that love sometimes came from the most unexpected sources. I'd found sanctuary in the arms of a man most people feared, and together we'd built something that transcended the darkness of our individual pasts. 47 men had disappeared before sunrise to ensure my safety. Marcus had died alone in Phoenix, broken by consequences he'd spent a lifetime avoiding, and I had been reborn as Sophia, rising from the ashes of Sarah's death to become someone stronger than either version of myself had ever been. As Dante kissed me to seal our vows, I thought about the night he'd asked me to show him who hurt me. I'd pointed to bruises and broken bones, cataloging years of abuse, but in doing so, I'd also shown him who I could become given the chance, and he'd given me that chance along with protection, partnership, and a love that existed in shades of gray rather than black and white. The city lights sparkled below us as we celebrated with the small group of people who knew our truth. Somewhere out there, other women were trapped in situations I'd escaped, but tomorrow Maria and I would find them. We'd offer them the same chance I'd been given, the same protection, the same possibility of transformation. I was free, I was loved, I was home. And it had all started with a simple warning to a dangerous man in an elegant restaurant before sunrise took away 47 threats and gave me back my life.